In India, Bakrie is the CEO of Bakrie Group, and just a little bit of background here. It means he is Bakrie itself is a huge conglomerate involved in manufacturing and infrastructure as well, and in India also happens to be the scion of one of the most storied business families in Indonesia as well. Anindya, great to see you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Martin. And
pleasure
thank
is
you for
ours.
having me here.
Pleasure. So, quickly, the view of big business and the CEO to the elections yesterday. If it is Prabowo, if it was a decisive first-round victory, if it is continuity, this should be all good.
I think so. Number one, thanks God, the 7th election in the last 35 years, and peaceful and stable, despite what you said. 204 million voters go to the 800,000 ballots, 82% turnout. At least is good for peace and stability in terms of the trust from the public. And number two, I think the lingering election issue is behind us. You could imagine if it is going to the runoff until June, right? So now we can actually go back to work. We can actually focus on trade and investment. And I think that's something that's very good. You know, even outside you see the humming and bustling already in Jakarta because people want to continue to contribute to this $1.3 trillion economy and also, you know, the largest economy in ASEAN.
Yeah.
Myself, even today, already heading to Kuala Lumpur for the APEC Business Advisory Council meeting because at the end of the day, the region is exciting with the 800 million people.
Indeed. So it's back to business as usual today. Yesterday was a public holiday because of elections. So let's get down to business and talk about a new area that Bakrie has recently entered, right? And that is the EV space. It's a huge story for Indonesia and for its industrialization and development. And you've done that through a company called Vector, ticker symbol VKTR, listed on the Jakarta Stock Exchange last year, right? And as far as we know, it is a commercial EV maker, so buses and trucks, and you've tied up with the Chinese EV giant BYD, and we were talking about this offline a few seconds ago, you've broken ground already on a massive manufacturing facility here in Indonesia.
So thank you, Martin. So we have been around for 82 years and focusing mostly on industrialization, energy transition now, and digitalization. If you think about it, all of them converge into electrification. So we started with the demand side, you know, trying to bring the demand of EV, accelerated the demand of EV via public transportation, therefore buses. So our buses, 52 buses already in Jakarta, already travel about 4 million kilometers and also producing 5,000 reduction of CO2 emissions. So we're quite happy with that. So that is Vector, but we want to focus on buses and trucks. And we're making facility in Central Java, in Magelang, up to 3,000 buses and trucks per year. But we don't want to stop there because this is as much as electrification story, as much as decarbonization story. So we also want to participate in the downstreaming process of battery materials.
Is Bakrie involved in nickel at all yet?
Bakrie has been involved in a lot of critical minerals such as copper and gold. Now we want to focus on nickel as well. But nickel is just the tip of the iceberg if you think about it, right? Because the value addition is very much in line with our industrialization story that we have had all this time. We could make bridges, ports, and also roads. We could certainly focus on downstreaming of critical minerals. And imagine, Martin, we're planning to process the critical minerals below the ground with renewable energy above the ground that is a huge potential in Indonesia, and probably clean energy. And probably we can export it not only to the east, but also to the west. I understand, and I'm sure you want to talk about this, but yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but there are a lot of opportunities that we see in this space. Yeah.
All right, so nickel downstreaming and export potential, let's talk about that, including to the west. We've talked to other guests about this as well. For nickel batteries, right, the U.S. is a huge market. Unfortunately, right now, there is no FTA, free trade agreement between Indonesia and the U.S. There's also no critical minerals agreement between the U.S. and Indonesia, like the one that the U.S. signed with Japan. Do you think that both of those issues should be pretty high on the agenda for any new Prabowo government?
I think so. I was in the delegation of President Jokowi last November to the United States. I was leading the business delegation in APEC in San Francisco, also went to Washington, D.C. high in the list of President Jokowi back there is Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement. And within that is how to make sure we have a pathway to make IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, compliant as a country. Yes, you're right. The FTA, we need to work on that, maybe limited FTA like Japan. But I think the world needs Indonesia resources as well. And Indonesia also wants to balance the trade. And Indonesia wants to also export the battery materials to the West. And US is certainly a huge market.
So I have to ask you, in order to take advantage of the IRA, the U.S. IRA, right, Indonesia is going to have to get around the fact that a lot of the Chinese investment in Indonesia, in nickel, they're on the entities list, which makes it very difficult to strike any sort of agreement with the U.S. That becomes a political problem. What happens then?
Now, this is an interesting topic. For example, today we hear one of the biggest OEM is trying to make a plant with a little bit of Chinese technology in Mexico, trying to take advantage of the Inflation Reduction Act. The beauty of it is that Indonesia is a part of ASEAN, right? As we're working on this so-called limited FTA to be IRA compliant, a lot of our partners in ASEAN, they already are having a nice trade. And Indonesia, being the biggest economy in ASEAN, can work together to go around it. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the nickel's supply from Indonesia is very much needed to stabilize the sustainable supply chain. And we think Indonesia will be able to find a way to, get there to the West. And I think Indonesia also needs to be the balancing power between the East and the West in the supply chain of the critical minerals.
So obviously you're not the first to talk about this whole idea, and the essence of it is, look, don't try and do it yourself. You've got friends, work with them as part of a regional supply chain.
In itself, it is the third largest region in terms of economy in the world with $7 trillion, right? And then Indonesia, again, is doing a lot of intra-trade. In any EV, you have, yes, nickel, manganese, cobalt, which a lot of our neighbors also have, but most importantly, it has also 3,000 chips per one bus, right? So you need to work with countries that actually focus on making semiconductor chips, right? And of course, we want the critical minerals coming from Indonesia and so on and so forth.
Indeed. And it's fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you dropping by.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay. Pleasure is ours. Pleasure is ours.
Thank you.
Anindya Bakrie, they're the CEO of the Bakrie Group, as our coverage here in Jakarta continues. We'll back to you.
And it'll continue a lot more.